Welcome to this long-awaited video on the lore of the World of Darkness's ultimate badass, Samuel the Skinner Haight. Sam Haight is a controversial figure from the pre-revised period of World of Darkness, when the games were more gonzo than street level. Sam Haight was originally introduced as Werewolf's answer to Caiaphas Smith and Sullivan Dane, a Garou kinfolk who hunted Garou in pursuit of becoming one of them. But as Haight appeared in more chronicles, his powers and his goals expanded, and let's say things got a little bit out of hand until White Wolf ultimately decreed his death. Subsequently, he has been a subject of discussion, derision, and even admiration from those who partake in the path of the power gamer. But without further ado, the history of Sam the Skinner Haight. Samuel Haight, or Sam as he preferred to be called, was born in Wyoming around 1947 or 1948, the youngest of 7 children, to a kinfolk mother and a Garou father who was a member of the Children of Gaia tribe, as well as the Pure Heart Sept in the Black Hills. As the youngest child of the Haight family, Sam also had the heaviest burden, as none of his siblings had bred true, meaning that none of them could become Garou. Sam certainly had all of the makings of a prospective werewolf. He was a standout student and athlete all throughout school and earned straight A's from grade school through high school, won all-state honors in football and baseball as well. None of this, however, impressed his father, as it became clear that Sam didn't have any wolf dreams, and therefore would likely never undergo a first change. Then, when his idiot cousins, the Carney brothers, both became Ragabash Garou, Sam's resentment of them turned to hatred. Hatred for them who didn't deserve the gift they had been given by the whims of the Garou's mad goddess Gaia. Hatred for the father who he could never please and who made him feel inadequate despite his many talents. And finally, hatred for the Garou as a whole, whose world was forever denied to him by some accident of birth that no one would or could explain. One of the few things that made his young life tolerable was his high school sweetheart, Diane Anderson. They would eventually get married after he had made it, or so he thought, whether it was in football, business, or medicine. They would start a family and then never give Wyoming or the Garou another thought. With that goal, Sam left home and went to the University of Wyoming. He graduated near the top of his class, but was beat out for the valedictorian honors by another student. He almost went pro in football, but blew out his knee in his senior year. He even almost got into medical school on a full scholarship, but someone who studied just a little bit more than him took that golden ticket away from him. Misery and anger eventually consumed the young Sam Haight. In his self-pity, he broke off his engagement with Diane and went through the painful process of rehabilitating his knee alone. By the time he could walk again without a cane, he had discovered a new love, hunting. So with his own mortal hands, he decided that he would become a greater hunter than any Garou. And by the time he was 30 years old, he was one of the best hunters in the world, and had killed the most dangerous predators that the natural world had to offer. But why? Why stop at just natural predators? Maybe it was the dormant Garou blood in his veins. Maybe it was the anger at his father and his family. But he needed something more dangerous to kill. The decision was reached almost accidentally when Sam happened to cross paths with a vampire of Clan Nosferatu, who battered him senseless and then fed from him. But as Nietzsche said in Twilight of the Idols, "Was mich nicht umbringt, macht mich starker." What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. His next encounter with vampires were more successful and more lucrative. In one hunt, he hit the jackpot. Not only did he stalk and kill a vampire of Clan Tremere, but did so in the Kindred's own haven, a haven which was also well stocked with thaumaturgical text. When combined with the stolen vampire blood in his veins, formed a core of magical power and knowledge that would ultimately start Sam Haight on the road to infamy. But hunting is an expensive hobby, and so is world travel, and Sam was not born to wealth. Instead, he paid for these excursions by working for the Nolan Harker Mining Transport Company in a management role. It paid well and allowed him time for his hunting trips. Besides his stories and trophies, well, some of his trophies, made him popular among the employees who were also hunters like him. But the tomes of thaumaturgy opened Sam's mind to new possibilities and opportunities. His globetrotting led him to India and into the arms of a secret cult from whom he learned the key to gaining what he had been denied by cruel fate, the ritual of sacred rebirth, an occult means by which the practitioner could become a Garou, or at least a facsimile of one. After killing the man who taught him the ritual, Haight thought about the father he despised, who, despite his own praise of the Garou and constant harping about the war against the worm, had died so easily and seemingly randomly from being struck down by a runaway truck, and the Carney brothers, his cousins, who had undergone the change, but it had driven them to madness. Why shouldn't he, who was clearly more fit than any of the three of them, have the power of the Garou? The ritual would take a good deal of preparation, performing of chants, acquisitions of rare herbs and minerals, not to mention the trivial matter of skinning 5 Garou of the same auspice under the proper conditions. But Sam's path was set, a path that would have tragic consequences for mortals, Garou, vampires, and mages. Mergers and acquisitions is a more arcane, costly, and lucrative science than sorcery. However, the holdings corporation Pentex are experts at acquiring businesses useful to them, and in 1985 they acquired NHMTC. In the process of considering the suitability of personnel to join the Pentex family, Sam Haight, then an office manager for Nolan Harker, was interviewed by the psychologist Dr. Reginald Kingsley in order to round out the profile that Pentex had worked up on Haight. Sam had a thorough understanding of Pentex thanks to his late and unlamented father, so he told Dr. Kingsley the truth about his history, about the Garou, and about his plans. Haight shared with Dr. Kingsley that he had acquired 2 of the 5 werewolf pelts he needed for the ritual of sacred rebirth, and that he, with his own 2 hands, intended to turn the world of darkness on its head. Of course, the doctor concluded that Sam, while highly intelligent and driven, was also paranoid, sadistic, psychopathic, had likely killed before and would do so again. Dr. Kingsley, in his professional capacity, recommended that Haight not only be prohibited from management in Pentex, but that he be institutionalized both for his own safety and for the safety of others. Pentex board member James Kiker, however, strongly disagreed with Dr. Kingsley's assessment. Sam was promoted to operations manager at Nolan Harker, while the good doctor died a sudden, tragic, and unforeseen death, followed soon after by an unforeseen accident which destroyed all of his professional records. Truly, who could expect so many bad things to happen to one person so closely in time? Oh well, can't grieve forever. Sam's new power at Nolan Harker meant that he could not only bring about his plan to carry out the ritual of sacred rebirth sooner, but he could also set into motion events that would result in the destruction of the Pure Heart Sept, which he had been raised near. He immediately made some personnel changes at Nolan Harker. Sam boosted company morale by taking some of the local drivers and workers on hunting trips with him. Not for wolves and Garou, though. He also improved relations with the local Sioux tribe by hiring some of the members for Nolan Harker, many of whom were kinfolk to the Wendigo. At first blush, this might seem like questionable decision-making given that Nolan Harker was recently acquired by Pentex, but the Wendigo kinfolk were never given access to anything sensitive. They were paid well, and should any of the Garou of another tribe lay a hand on the kinfolk, well, the Wendigo wouldn't care about the whys, only the whos, and those whos would pay in their own blood. Sam Haight was personally dangerous, but a skill that was more dangerous than any blade, bullet, or magic he had was the skill to anticipate and prepare for his enemies. The last part of the plan was one only possible due to Nolan Harker joining the Pentex family. Sam put together a proposal where the federal government would trade land in the Black Hills National Forest around the Pure Heart Sept for land owned by Pentex elsewhere. The land of the Black Hills National Forest would then be leased to Nolan Harker, who would develop the land as only a mining company could. but Sam's hunt for werewolf pelts and the ritual of sacred rebirth had hit a roadblock. Garou are difficult to catch alone, and he had gotten lucky twice, once with a get of Fenris, and again with a member of the Black Spiral Dancers. In going over Nolan Harker's records while planning to destroy the Pure Heart Sept, he stumbled on information about the Valkenburg Foundation. The Valkenburg Foundation was established to rehabilitate lunatics, Garou who had resisted their first change so strongly it drove them mad. The foundation was located on a ranch near the Pure Heart Sept, but it had been closed for nearly 50 years after the death of its founder, Dr. Leopold Valkenburg of the Stargazers tribe. Valkenburg's granddaughter, Gretchen, a lawyer and lobbyist, had recently reopened the foundation and resumed her grandfather's work by hiring various Garou and Kinfolk staff while she shuttled between Wyoming, New York, and D.C. Sam made several substantial donations to the Valkenburg Foundation through its director of operations, Victor Helms. Sam was not motivated by any compassion for the mentally ill and certainly not for any Garou. In his research on the Valkenburg Foundation, Sam discovered that his cousins, the Carney brothers, were being treated there, along with several other Garou lunatics. Sam leaned hard on Victor Helms, both as a donor and a supposedly concerned family member, to be permitted a visit to the Carney brothers, just to see that they were doing all right and being treated well, and pay no mind whatsoever to the silver skinning knives in his boots. Helms always sent Sam a warm thank you letter for his donations, but made clear that the Carney brothers were not yet well enough to receive visitors. But there was another route. Sam also discovered that the Valkenburg Foundation released lupus Garou they had cured into the wilds of the Black Hills National Forest. These former lunatics could not shape change, but they were still Garou, and just what he needed to become the first skin dancer. Sam took a few of Nolan Harker's security to New Haven, Wyoming for a few beers on his dime. These men weren't the smartest, but they were brave, and once they had enough brews in them, Sam suggested that they go hunt some coyotes that had been harassing the local farmer's sheep. A little shooting at animals, public service, and more beers after? Great time. They had no idea of what they were really hunting, or why Sam had brought them along. In the woods near the Valkenburg Foundation, 4 cured lunatics, all lupus Garou, had formed a makeshift pack and roamed the woods near the sept. They had no idea that the 3 of them were about to die in the dark of a new moon. Sam's hunting party fell on the lupus with shotguns and automatic rifles. Their shooting was all over the place thanks to the beers they were drinking before and during the hunt. Sam Haight, on the other hand, was stone cold sober and made sure that 3 of the 4 beasts died, though one managed to get away. That was fine. Sam had what he needed. He quickly skinned the 3 Garou with ease and decapitated them, then loaded his prizes into his own truck. Whether the other hunters survived the angry pack of Garou he knew would be hot on his heels didn't matter. Sam packed enough silver weapons to bring down any Garou that might come after him, and his truck was souped up enough to outrun anything he couldn't outshoot. But the other hunters had just come from work, and many of them still had their company IDs on them. Sam then dumped his truck in Nolan Harker, gathered up his prizes, and continued home on foot. Anyone who tried to get through the Nolan Harker security perimeter would have a tough time getting past the electrified fences. Sam didn't even care that he had left his personnel file in his office, along with the proposals to trade federal land for Pentex-owned land, or the check stubs from his donations to the Valkenburg Foundation. For Sam, Christmas had come early, and he had presents to unwrap back home. Sam's nearby home was a handsome double-A frame with a large front and backyard and no trees, a strong fence, and a couple of well-trained Dobermans prowling the grounds. The house itself was an anti-Garou trap, with simple tripwires and spring traps loaded with silver shrapnel, intended to slow Garou down rather than kill them outright. Sam's house, aside from being booby-trapped to hell and back, was straightforward. A kitchen, an arsenal, bedroom, small occult library, a stench of the worm, all of the accoutrements of comfortable modern living. But Sam's best work was in the basement, behind a reinforced steel door. There he kept his trophies: lions, tigers, bears, oh my, mountain gorillas, wolves, elephants, and so on. Being security conscious, Sam replaced several of his trophy's eyes with hidden cameras. The centerpieces of his massive collection were 2 severed Garou heads, his first 2, one belonging to a Geta Fenris and the other a black spiral dancer, placed at the entrance of a hidden door reinforced with steel bars that only opened by flipping 2 well-placed switches located inside of the dead Garou's mouths. Should anyone get past the reinforced door by whatever means but the switches, Sam left a few more surprises, starting with 2 claymore mines positioned to cover the doorway and the entrance in lethal shrapnel. Additionally, speakers located in the heads of the dead Garou would begin playing recordings of the howl of mockery and the wail of foreboding, which would test the restraint of even the most disciplined of Garou. But all of this security was simply to buy Sam the time he needed to complete the ritual of sacred rebirth, which he did. Sam Haight, now a skin dancer, used a fetish that he had stolen from the black spiral dancer whose head decorated his basement to step into the Umbra for the very first time. What he saw was that his home was a wormish blight, polluted and thick with banes that had fed on his hatred of the Garou for years, along with the ritual of sacred rebirth, which was practically a feast of wormish energies. The banes surrounded Sam, beckoning him to join them, and Sam, for the first time in years, screamed in terror, activated the fetish again, and disappeared deeper into the Umbra, leaving his blighted house for the Garou to cleanse, with fang, claw, and sacred rite. But by then it was too late. The Skinner was on the loose. Sam had been driven temporarily mad by the Banes, and landed somewhere in the Worm's realm, in the domain of a spirit called Ischin, who made Sam its unwilling guest. Ischin desired to return to the material world after having been banished to the deep Umbra by the Garou. Sam's sudden appearance and in possession of the shedding of the spirit skin necklace was a gift dropped right into the demon's lap, which it soon relieved Sam of. Ischin used the necklace as a focal point to open a door between the deep Umbra and the material world. It intended for its agent, a Zamitzi named Dr. Stephen Hargett, to open a door into the spirit realms at the direction of one of Ischin's lesser servants, wide enough for the greater spirit to enter through. Needless to say, allowing a soul-eating worm spirit to enter reality would definitely be a bad thing. But Sam cared less about that than he did his own escape. Using some of the thaumaturgy he knew, he piggybacked his communication on Ischin's dream sending to Dr. Hargett to warn the Zamitzi Sabbat packmates of just what the doctor was up to. Now, the Sabbat are down for all sorts of depravity and brutality, but the one thing that is prohibited among every pack and in every Sabbat domain is demon worship. And Dr. Hargett was building a machine a la Reanimator to bring Ischin through. As the Sabbat vampires tried to stop Dr. Hargett, Sam managed to steal his fetish necklace from the doctor's machine and return to the material realm himself to cause a bit more mischief with his good friends at Pentex. After seemingly returning from the dead, Sam Haight was a rising star in Pentex with powerful allies on the board of directors. One was the previously mentioned James Kiker, who was responsible for Sam's promotion at Nolan Harker and allowed him the resources to perform the ritual of sacred rebirth. His other ally was Robert Allred, a kinfolk of the Geta Fenris and director of Pentex's development projects in the Amazon rainforest. Allred, like Sam, coveted the power of the Garou, and it was Allred who sparked the idea of replacing the Garou with a new tribe, the Skin Dancers, kinfolk willing to cut down their Garou relatives and take their Gaia-given gifts for themselves. But in allying with Allred, Sam also took on Allred's enemies for his own, such as Pentex board member Elliot Michi, a corpulent and gluttonous devotee of the Eater of Souls, who coveted the Amazon project for his own portfolio but was outvoted by the board. Additionally, Allred gave Sam command of Pentex's deadly first teams operating in the Amazon, to the consternation of Sergeant Roland Thompson, leader of the elite 1st Team 13, and until Sam's arrival, the big swinging dick of Pentex's military operations in the rainforest. Not only was Sam given priority in corporate rank and requisitions, but he took the El Dorado expedition from Thompson in 1st Team 13, which further fueled his animosity for the Skinner. What Sam didn't know was that Michi and Thompson were willing to scuttle Pentex's Amazon operations to embarrass both Sam and Robert Allred. Either Michi or Thompson, or both, leaked information about the El Dorado expedition to the Garou, in the hopes that the wolves would send Sam running, or better yet, kill him outright. For his part, Sam had his own allies, gathered from the broken or discarded elements of Pentex's first teams. These mercenaries and mutants soon became known as the Stragglers, and each had come into the Skinner's orbit in their own way. For some of the Stragglers, Sam promised rich rewards, cash on the barrelhead for every dead Garou they brought to him, with its pelt intact. Others Sam won over with his charisma and growing power, and these were prepared to fight and die for him if needs be. With this cobbled-together army of monsters and misfits, Sam Haight would lay siege to the mythical golden city of El Dorado. But what is El Dorado? El Dorado, the city of gold that brought the conquistadors west in search of it, was indeed real. Pentex knew it and wanted it, not only to loot the city, but to destroy the mystical cairn that Pentex believed was at its heart. Sam took the El Dorado expedition from Roland Thompson because he too wanted El Dorado, not the city, but El Dorado, the person. The city of El Dorado was named for a powerful dream speaker mage who built and protected the city, and had ruled over it as its king. The millennia-old mage had used powerful correspondence magic to make his city undetectable to those he did not wish to find it. On top of this, he made pacts with the native Black Furies and Balam Were Jaguars to protect El Dorado in exchange for his mystical aid. However, a group of conquistadors who were technocrats in truth were unable to enter El Dorado, so they conducted a correspondence ritual of their own, effectively unmapping the city and shunting it into the Umbra. The technocrats went home and reported that they had neutralized El Dorado and its ruler. However, El Dorado, the mage, reopened a passage to his city in 1933 by guiding an archaeologist named Joseph Hurlick towards the city. For his part, Hurlick forged a path to El Dorado with his own will and dreams, and opened a passage between the material world and the Umbra. However, Hurlick was never allowed to leave, as El Dorado could not risk the technocrats discovering that their spell had been compromised. He placed himself in a magical slumber and communed with Gaia, the Garou, and the Bastet in order to protect them and the Amazon. So what business did Sam Haight have with a millennia-old dream speaker mage? The only thing that moved the Skinner to act: more power. Sam wished to steal El Dorado's power for his own, and he had found the means to do so. An Uktena Metis named Owl's Bane Snatcher had discovered a fetish weapon lost in an abandoned camp of the technocrat conquistadors 3 centuries earlier, which had the power of stealing the memories and abilities of those slain by its wielder. Owl's Bane Snatcher thought Gaia had favored him when he not only found the sword, but happened upon the hated enemy of the Garou, the Skinner. If he could kill Sam Haight, he would gain such renown as to surpass the misfortune of his birth. Sadly, he miscalculated. By this point, Sam the Skinner Haight was too much of a foe for a lone Garou who was not an elder. Haight beat Owl's unconscious and took the sword, but rather than add Owl's skin to his growing collection, Sam left the Metis to the mercies of his old friend, Dominic King, an ally from the Nolan Harker days who Sam had rescued from a mining accident, and then gave King's broken body to Pentex in order to save his life. Pentex turned King into a deadly former, with the ability to infect his victims with the worm's taint and mutations. Sensing the magic of the Conquistador's sword, Sam set out to test its power, and was delighted to learn that he could steal gifts from the Garou he slew. And if he could steal those potent magic abilities, why not the power of an ancient mage to go along with it? Armed with the Conquistador's sword and the stragglers, Sam Haight set out for El Dorado. Ever the master planner, Sam set up a number of ambushes and traps in the jungle to slow down any Garou pursuing him. Much like Wyoming, Sam didn't need to kill anyone following him, only slow them down long enough for him to finish his work. And in this, he stuck with the classics: tripwires, spring traps, snares, and claymore mines, generously sprinkled with silver supplied by Pentex. For anyone surviving his traps, Sam positioned sharpshooters in the jungle and gave them enough supplies for several days, along with the promise of monetary compensation for every Garou pelt delivered to him. For those who managed to escape the traps and the shooters, Sam then left behind a group of lethal Fomori, along with a chimera to kill anyone approaching the entrance to the Dorado realm. With all of his forces, resources, and intellect, Sam reached the marble and gold city of El Dorado, slew many of its Black Fury and Kinfolk protectors, and managed to reach the slumbering El Dorado himself. He found the mage weakened and disoriented from having just returned to his own body after decades of slumber. Sam used this to his advantage, and thrust the Conquistador's sword into El Dorado's heart, fatally wounding the ancient mage. However, Sam discovered that the Conquistador's sword was not created to contain the power of one like El Dorado. The sword cracked, then shattered in an explosion of light and energy. At this point, a trio of wild spirits, summoned by the remaining elders of Dorado Realm's Black Furies, descended on Sam Haight, carrying him off into a maelstrom of chaotic fury that appeared to rip the Skinner into pieces. But without El Dorado's power to maintain the realm, it soon collapsed in on itself, as the survivors were forced to flee their home of centuries. El Dorado's spirit joined with the animal totems of Gaia, and he returned to the realm of dreams. As for Sam Haight, he had failed to claim El Dorado's power and lost the Conquistador's sword, but he had been able to gain rudimentary knowledge of awakened magic during his murder of the mage, which would prove very useful to him later. After the fall of El Dorado, Sam Haight re-emerged from the Umbra more powerful than before. Having tasted the dynamic magic of the Awakened, he decided he needed more of it. Yet he was in a precarious position. By 1994, two of his supporters, Robert Allred and James Kiker, were assassinated by Shadow Walker of the Wendigo tribe. Sam's bridges with Pentex weren't burnt, but they looked a little bit shaky, so he turned to another group, the Black Spiral Dancers. Armed with his natural charisma and newly stolen magic, the Skinner enlisted a group of Black Spiral Dancer metas to his cause, promising that he could cure them of their sterility if they aided him in gaining more power. The servants of the worm are not one big happy family, and Sam wanted to exterminate all Garou, and this included the fallen tribe. But for now, he needed enforcers, and they would serve as a distraction while he advanced on his next target, the Crombie Farmstead. The Crombie Farmstead, located in rural Kansas, was a powerful verbena chantry thanks to its world tree, made from the fossilized body of the chantry's founder, and made prosperous again by its famous pumpkins. These large pumpkins, aside from the ones the Crombie sent to market, were also supercharged with Taz, essentially making them big mage batteries for anyone who acquired one. Sam Haight and his temporary allies arrived at the Crombie farmstead with a plan. The Black Spiral Dancers would conceal themselves in the cornfields to neutralize any of the Crombie's magical guardians, while Sam negotiated to join the chantry. He offered to trade his knowledge of vampire thaumaturgy for their tutelage in awakened magic. No one knew that Sam already had a man on the inside, Robert Crombie. Robert had turned from the verbena and from the traditions and joined the progenitors of the technocracy. Robert and Sam had met some weeks before and hatched a backup plan if Sam was not permitted to join the Crombie farmstead. They would destroy everything and massacre the Crombies to the last mage. Alistair Crombie, leader of the chantry for over 2 centuries, was very well informed about his approaching guest, thanks to his Garou kinfolk neighbors on the Miller farm. Alistair had even learned some of Sam's exploits in the Amazon, but not his murder of El Dorado. At first, the encounter between Sam Haight and the Crombies was pleasant and cordial. Despite being a power-hungry serial killer, Sam was pleasant and amusing when he needed to be, but the Crombies were planning to either neutralize or kill the Skinner if they could. The lady at the house, Alison Crombie, tried to do the job with drugged coffee, but she underestimated just how good Sam's hearing and nose were, even in Hamid form. Sam also overheard the Crombies plotting, smelled the sleeping potion in the coffee, and not long after he followed Alison into the kitchen, still speaking pleasantly, he severed the Verbena matriarch's head from her shoulders, tossed the head into the living room, and declared that if they wanted to do things the hard way, he would oblige them. What began was a vicious nocturnal battle in the Crombie cornfields as Scarecrow Guardians awakened and battled the Black Spiral Dancers, while Sam enacted his backup plan, making a mad dash for the Crombies' World Tree, which had been prepared for his arrival by the traitorous Robert, who disabled the tree's wards and protection spells, while he returned to the farmhouse to destroy his family's cauldrons, another source of their magical power before fleeing. The World Tree, now defenseless before the Skinner, was killed, and its quintessence siphoned into a huge branch that the Skinner broke off. As a final twist of the knife for the Crombies and anyone left alive, Sam used his new artifact to summon the World Tree's guardian, a nightmarish amalgamation of corpses and skeletons of dead Crombie mages, along with previous victims of the Guardian scarecrows. Once the Guardian was summoned, Sam escaped into the Umbra to complete his side of the bargain made with Robert Crombie and the progenitors. After leaving the Crombie Chantry in ruins, Sam traveled west. Part of Sam's bargain with the traitor progenitor Robert Crombie involved other terms, including a trade of scientific specimens. Sam Haight delivered several samples of kindred vitae and genetic material harvested from every tribe of the Garou Nation, flesh and blood, to the San Francisco branch of Developmental Neogenetics Amalgamated. In trade, Sam received a genetically engineered human, at least partially constructed with his DNA, and enhanced to a superhuman level. This clone is never addressed again, so I won't mention it again, unless it's amusing. Then I'll wear it out like Sam wearing a werewolf pelt. When he retired to his rented apartment after the trade was completed, he, who had recently been a spirit, saw a ghost from his own past on TV. Diane Anderson, now going by the name Diane White, on the news, in tears and pleading for whoever had kidnapped her son Gabriel to release him unharmed. Then it cut to some talking head reporting that the teenager's former babysitter had seen some strange people hustle the boy into a van before driving off. Seeing Diane again awakened something in Sam he thought he had buried years ago. Instead of spending the evening relaxing, he prepared to hunt, determined to bring Diane's son back to her alive, and make sure whoever had taken the boy died as painfully as possible. Little did Sam know, but that night, Gabriel White was a popular commodity. The boy's initial kidnappers were two Garou, Alan Sothersby and Lois Penobscot, who were driving the boy to a cairn in Muir Woods National Monument, where he could learn the ways of the Garou. Hot on their heels was Sean Ingram, a private detective who also happened to be the next-door neighbor of Gabriel, and was a Ronin Garou, meaning he had neither tribe nor pack, or rather, he had renounced both, because Ingram was a former Black Spiral Dancer. And speaking of the Black Spiral Dancers, they composed the third interested party in Gabriel that night, several of them, being led by one Edward McTire, who was also known as Auroch, and also was Gabriel White's biological father. McTire wanted to take the boy for some of that classic, nurturing, and supportive parenting for which the tribe of the Worm is so well known. Unfortunately for the Whites, McTire started his search for his son with them. The dancers surrounded the White residence while McTire went in first to question Gabriel's adoptive parents, which, in typical dancer fashion, turned into a scene from The Hills Have Eyes. But unfortunately for the dancers, Sam Haight had the same idea as they did, and he had no particular qualms at this point about which tribe he killed. He was more confident in his equipment and skills, and blew 3 of the dancers' heads clean off with a .44 caliber before they could shape change into their war forms, but not before one of them cried out, "Skinner," a name that the Garou had given him, one that he liked, and one that all knew with revulsion and fear. McTire, transformed for the ease of terrorizing the whites, exploded out of the door in Krynos form to watch his packmates die. McTire howled and a car came streaking around the corner spraying gunfire, but Sam ducked into the bushes. McTire hauled off the corpses of his fallen comrades into a stolen station wagon, and the remaining Black Spiral dancers took off in pursuit of their true quarry. When Sam entered the white residence, Diane was cradling the very dead body of her husband John, a pool of blood under them made by the torn open wound on his throat. But even here, now after years apart, amidst death and carnage, Sam remembered how much he had loved Diane. Beasts, raging Garou, gunfire, and even mad spirits couldn't deter him. But her face, older but still just as beautiful as he remembered, made his stomach flutter. He apologized to her for being too late to save her husband, but he said that he would do whatever he could to save her son, then told her to come with him. The trail was still fresh. The smell of blood and cordite were practically flares to his skin dancer senses. The Black Spiral dancers didn't have much longer left to live. Sean Ingram had caught up to Sothersby and Penobscot, and things had gotten out of hand fast during a traffic jam on the Golden Gate Bridge. Ingram had shot Sothersby with silver bullets before Sothersby could attack him. Meanwhile, the dancers had abandoned their station wagon on one end of the bridge, transformed, and gone on ahead on foot to attack Ingram and Penobscot, an attack that left Penobscot dead as well, and Ingram bound up in steel cable. Sean Ingram had the singular misfortune to not only fall to the hands of Black Spiral dancers, but his former packmates and pack leader, Edward McTire. Ingram had not only abandoned the pack, but he stole McTire's son. McTire tortured Ingram to try to find Gabriel. Unfortunately for the Black Spiral dancers, this mixture of business and pleasure gave Sam Haight the distraction he needed to creep up through the San Francisco fog on them, armed with an automatic shotgun loaded with silver shot. The first shot turned a dancer's head into a pulp of meat and fur. The second suffered a similar fate, only 4 feet away, but most of its internal organs were cut to pieces. And then there were 2 left trying to flank Sam. Sam turned his attention to Edward McTire on his right and blew the dancer's knee apart. The other's courage failed it, and tried to flee only to take a load of silver shot to the hip, which caused it to trip and tumble off the side of the Golden Gate Bridge. This distraction, however, gave McTire enough time to muster a single savage lunge at Sam, and ripped a deep wound in the right side of the Skinner's face. Sam ignored his shotgun and the rifle on his back. Instead, he unsheathed a pair of silver-plated skinning knives on his belt, because Edward O'Rock McTire had just earned himself a date with the Skinner. Sam first severed the hamstrings of the Black Spiral dancer with ease. Then the knives slid through his tendons on the rotator cuffs like soft cheese. McTire's snarls turned to screams, but the only muscles left in his power were those of his head and his neck. From there, it was only 2 minutes for Sam the Skinner Haight to cut, sever, and pull Edward McTire's thick silvery pelt from his massive body, as Sean Ingram watched on in horror. Sam Haight, knife still in hand and elbow deep in blood, with half his face laid open by claw marks, was a nightmare made flesh for any Garou. Instead of adding Sean Ingram's pelt to the collection, the Skinner offered him a deal. Tell him where Gabriel White was, and he could hang on to his skin, for now. Just then, the van roof exploded with an ear-splitting shriek of metal as a pure snow-white Krynos werewolf emerged, howling in pain and fury. The Skinner turned and smiled, admired the beautiful pelt, and prepared to relieve its owner of it, but Sean Ingram, still bleeding and half-conscious from the beating delivered by the Black Spiral dancers, shouted at Sam not to kill the werewolf. that it was Gabriel, Diane's son, who had just undergone the first change. Sam couldn't believe what he heard, but deep down he knew it was true. But then, why shouldn't he kill it? Killing Garou was his mission, his sacred mission, his purpose. But as he looked at this Garou pup, who was practically defenseless before him, he only saw Diane's face in his mind's eye, and remembered how he had hurt her by leaving her years ago. He had promised to return her son to her, so he sheathed his knives and changed shape. Gabriel's first attack was clumsy, and Sam had him on the ground, his fangs at the boy's neck in a flash, enough pressure to cause pain, but not enough to kill. Gabriel's rage eventually subsided and he shifted back to his Hamid form. He was weakened, delirious, and calling for his mother. Sam claimed the pelts of the 5 dancers and weighted down their bodies before tossing them off the bridge, including Edward McTire, whose head was still struggling as his body hit the ink-black water of the San Francisco Bay. Sam wanted Lois Penobscot's pelt as well, but Ingram argued, threatened, and ultimately pleaded against violating the body of a former friend, and Sam relented. As Diane held her trembling son, she called after Sam, but Sam didn't turn back. Instead, he walked back into the dark, dragging werewolf pelts behind him. It turned out leaving Diane was just as hard the second time as the first. But he couldn't stop, not yet. Maybe he would see her again one day, and actually make things right with her. Little did Sam Haight know that that night he, the first of the Skin Dancers, had saved Gabriel White, the last of the White Howlers. Now armed with more skins for his new tribe and an obscene amount of stolen magic, Sam focused on the specter that haunts many men of power, their own mortality. Sam believed that he would need more than one mortal lifetime to accomplish his goal of destroying the Garou. He did not yet have the keys or subtlety that the Awakened used to fend off their own demise. However, he had been partaking of kindred vitae for years to arrest his aging and empower himself. He was also a skilled thaumaturgist. A mage he had made the acquaintance of in New York gave him the idea of visiting New Orleans and finding a vampire to make him immortal by way of an auction run by an amnesiac caitiff named Raymond, who sold kidnapped vampires to elders of their kind, for whom the blood of mortals could no longer sustain them. Sam's plan was to buy a vampire and use his considerable power to force said vampire to embrace him. Yet when he met Raymond, something set off the Skinner's mental alarms about the shady caitiff. As the night of the auction approached, Sam was discovered by a coterie of vampires at his hotel near the New Orleans docks, who were looking to shut down Raymond's auction. The kindred did not know exactly who they were dealing with, or if they had, they would have left as fast as celerity could take them. Instead, Sam invited them to a restaurant, sat down with them, and questioned them about the nature of vampire existence. But the more the vampires told him, the less he liked the sound of the deal. So Sam instead offered the kindred a bargain. He would tell them who ran the auction and where to find him, and all they had to do was part with some of their vitae for his consumption. With the agreement completed, Sam Haight left New Orleans far more intact than he had left other places he visited. Though he no longer wanted the embrace, Sam still believed that vampire blood held the key to the problem of his mortality. He hypothesized that sufficiently ancient blood would grant him functional immortality. He had heard rumors that one of the most ancient of the kindred race, an antediluvian, made its lair somewhere near Mexico City. Ever the hunter, Sam began plotting to steal the antediluvian's power, as he had done to so many others. Unfortunately for him, the Skinner was too well known by this point. He arrived in Mexico City, effectively playing World of Darkness on Dante Must Die difficulty. But Sam had new allies, including some of his skin dancers, who were willing to create spectacular and devastating distractions on his behalf. In 1994, at 12:01 p.m., The arrival of the Skinner was heralded by an explosion of bombs all around Mexico City, planted by loyal mortal allies. For good measure, he even targeted a few kindred havens to maximize the chaos. Few died in the bomb attacks, but the rumors of hundreds of casualties sent the city into a panic. But the real mayhem started, as it always does, when the lights go out. 5.5 hours after the first bombs were detonated, when sidewalks and streets were packed full and emergency services were at their limits, a second wave of bombs were set off at nearby power stations. The technocracy deployed hit marks and men in black into the streets to restore order. The vampires of the Sabbat took to the night in a fury to find out who had attacked their havens and to make them suffer. Tradition mages in Garou were either ducking or fighting vampire packs and technocrat constructs while trying to figure out just what the hell happened, though some in the know had heard rumors that Sam Haight had carved a path of destruction all the way down to Mexico. The goal of the Skinner was chaos, a smokescreen for his true intent. Once the power grid went down and everything had gone to hell, Sam made his way to the ruins of the pyramid of Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war. Haight believed that Huitzilopochtli was an antediluvian, whose blood would give him immortality, but more importantly the time he needed to finally exterminate the Garou. But instead of a sleeping vampire, he found nothing. The ancient's lair appeared to have been long abandoned, but there was an interesting passageway leading beneath the pyramid to somewhere. Sam Haight was too wary to risk his own life by descending into the pyramid alone, so he left to gather backup and return the next night. What he, or anyone who might have pursued him, didn't realize yet was that he had found an entrance into a place as near to hell on earth as can exist and still be called part of the material world. This place was the underbelly of the Worm. The underbelly of the Worm was a home to a Black Spiral Dancer hive, a Nosferatu anti-tribu warren of followers of the Path of Evil Revelations, and a Nefandi labyrinth, all intersected and stacked atop one another. It was also the location of the only moon bridge in Mexico City, so any Garou who thought to get the element of surprise on Sam Haight would effectively be signing their own death warrants, and that's if they're lucky. After all, Haight only wanted their lives and their skins, but the denizens of the underbelly of the Worm would take their souls, one piece at a time, whether that meant dancing the Black Spiral, being tortured and forced onto the Path of Evil Revelations, or being forced into a Nephandic call until the soul inverted. But accessing Huitzilopochtli's haven meant traversing this nest of hell worshippers, preferably by stealth. Even Sam was more inclined to get in and get out as fast as he could, rather than try to skin every Black Spiral Dancer in Mexico City. Once he reached the vampire's former haven, Sam frantically searched for clues about where it might have gone. Mistakenly believing that Huitzilopochtli had left Mexico City in favor of the hidden city of Petra Jordan, he magically teleported himself across the world. However, he missed a crucial clue among the decaying scrolls of the war god's former haven. Huitzilopochtli had never left Mexico at all. Instead, the vampire's followers transported him nearby to the town of Paraiso Vista, the view of paradise. Sam Haight did not spend long in Jordan. He was corrected by his unknown guardian angels of a sort. You see, Sam had won the interest of a group of Mexican marauders, 3 in total, who saw in Sam an agent of chaos the likes of which they hadn't seen in centuries. And depending upon how far Sam could be pushed, there was consideration of inviting him along their wild ride on the road of insanity. But in the meantime, they helpfully pointed out that what he was looking for wasn't in Petra, but in Paraiso Vista. The Marauders wanted Haight to reach his goal, if for no other reason than to see what the outcome would be, and they intended to protect him from a safe distance. But little did he realize that Huitzilopochtli was not slumbering. He was awake, and had plans of his own for when the Skinner arrived in Paraiso Vista. For 300 years, Shaitan of Clan Bali ruled Paraiso Vista, protected the tranquil little town just 80 miles outside of Mexico City from banditos, soldiers, missionaries, revolutionaries, cartels, and worst of all, government officials. Any vampire who tried to pass through the town disappeared, killed by Shaitan's 3 Bali servants, or presented to the master as a sacrifice in the form of their blood and their souls. The Aztecs had named the bloodthirsty demonic Shaitan the Hummingbird of the Left, Huitzilopochtli, and the Turquoise Prince. And Sam Haight had dutifully done everything Shaitan desired to that point. He had managed to set the Sabbat, the Black Spiral Dancers, and the technocracy of Mexico City at each other's throats. The sacrifice had been prepared, and all that was left was for the blood to be spilled. But for now, the ancient vampire was content to wait in his haven, beneath the seal of the dragon, in peaceful, placid Paraiso Vista, watching to see which way his pawns moved on the board. He knew that Sam Haight was both protected and pursued, and if the Skinner overcame his adversaries, as he had done in the past, Shaitan planned to give him exactly what he desired, his blood. After all, good help is so hard to find. On that note, when Sam Haight arrived in Paraiso Vista, he was prepared for war. 4 of his skin dancers accompanied him, all of whom were battle-hardened and combat-trained. Following them were 10 Fomori, all of lethal capability. The entire contingent was kitted out with automatic weapons, grenades, and a new toy that the Skinner had built for just this occasion, the Sun Lamp, a fetish that stored and released high concentrations of solar energy directed at a single target. In truth, Haight would rather negotiate with Shaitan than fight him, but better to have and not need than to need and not have. Regardless of when Sam Haight arrived in Paraiso Vista or who was chasing him, the hidden town was doomed to be destroyed. His forces and those arrayed against him flattened the town to the ground. And as for the denizens, some may have escaped the battle, or huddled in their homes, or died in the maelstrom of flames, claws, and steel. But every soul that died in Paraiso Vista belonged to Shaitan, who eventually rose from his crypt to personally complete the sacrifice of his human flock, or what remained of it, and consecrate their souls to his master, Baal. At some point in the fight, someone turned the sun lamp on Shaitan, and discretion being the better part of valor, the ancient Bali chose to tactically withdraw and hatch more evil plans some other night. As for Sam, the Skinner Haight, he was finally brought down by his own hubris. Overuse and vulgar use of the staff of the World Tree had built up a massive paradox around Haight that finally had to be paid off. And what better display of the folly of vulgar magic than an earth-shattering explosion? By the time the sun rose, Paraiso Vista was no more. The landscape was devastated. Stone had melted and run along the ground like wax. Trees had turned to crystal. Animals had been mutated beyond recognition. And all that remained of Sam Haight, whose ambition had carried him to heights of power few could imagine, and made him a terror to creatures who considered themselves to be true monsters, was a skeleton stripped of hair, skin, flesh and sinews, and charred into a single blackened mass, standing tall one last time amidst the carnage he had caused in pursuit of the destruction of the Garou. Given the body count that Sam Haight racked up in life, and his antics in disrupting the Days of the Dead in Mexico City, which were important to its wraiths, he managed to place himself fairly high on the to-do list of the Grim Legion, the cohort of wraiths who died by violence. When the Skinner finally crossed the shroud, his soul was quickly reaped by the executioners and consigned to the soul forges. Rather than making anything useful of such a potent and fearsome villain, the remains of Sam Haight were hammered and worked into a decorative ashtray, which came to rest in the possession of a minor bureaucrat of the Stygian hierarchy. And that was the long, twisting, and strange career of Samuel the Skinner Haight. People had been complaining about Sam Haight being a munchkin, wearing the plot armor, or that he was really a joke character all along because Phil Brucato said so. Even though Brucato wasn't writing the character, James Moore was, but I digress. So let me give you my thoughts on our boy Sammy. Initially, Sam Haight was, or had the potential to be, a truly terrifying villain for werewolves. A kinfolk who knew too much about the Garou, who knew how to fight them with or without supernatural powers, and was persuasive or manipulative enough to turn other kinfolk against the Garou with the promise of becoming skin dancers like him. How safe would the Garou be in their own homes or cairns? How long until a resentful kinfolk, ears full of the Skinner's poison, killed a Garou in their sleep to take their power for themselves? Sam was moving towards this kinfolk revolt before his explosive exit in Mexico. And Sam was not only a threat to the Garou nation. As talked about before, he had no qualms about putting black spiral dancers under his knife. And black spiral dancer kinfolk would likely have even fewer compunctions against killing their true-born relations than their Gaian counterparts. Now White Wolf could have given us the Gaian Garou and the black spiral dancers teaming up, first time and only time, to take on Sam Haight, the skin dancers, and whoever else he gathered to his side. If we really needed to put true magic at the Skinner's disposal, we just have Sam promise some cairns to some unscrupulous mages. If we need to get him some vampires on the team, let's have him cuddle up to some anarchs who think Sam is a true freedom fighter for the downtrodden or some such nonsense, because he knocked off a few elders to take their blood for his own use. And we might as well get the wraiths on board. If Sam has thaumaturgy, why not necromancy to go with it? He then takes the fetters of some powerful wraiths, or even the fetters of people he's killed himself so he can enslave them in the afterlife, to add insult to injury. So our Skinner coalition is just getting bigger and badder, and I'll pause this mini-apocalypse right here, and remind the listeners that crossover games really aren't worth it. Now it's time for the criticism. I'll gloss over the tried and trues very quickly. Sam Haight is overpowered. Absolutely. Sam has plot armor, along with half of White Wolf's quote-unquote signature characters, including the guy who supposedly rocked up to a member of the Inner Circle with a shotgun and lived to tell about it. Railroading abounds in Skinner stories. Well, that's kind of a truism of White Wolf Chronicles in general. My two big criticisms of Sam Haight are how he developed as a character and his stories. As to his character, giving a villain more power is not really an issue. My issue is that his character shifted from "I want to destroy the Garou" to "oh look, a shiny new toy for me to get." The second problem I have is that nearly every chronicle revolving around Sam Haight is effectively the same. Sam wants the shiny new toy, the player characters have to chase him to keep him from getting the shiny new toy, the characters don't manage to stop him from getting the shiny new toy, and then Sam absconds with the shiny new toy and doesn't do much with it until his next toy haul adventure. He's kind of like a homicidal Matt Cardona. Related to that is a third criticism. I know I said two, but I'm giving a third anyway. The chaos factor. How is it that one story in which Sam doesn't have plot armor manages to be the worst written of the bunch? What was the point of that Petra Jordan side trip? And Pandemonium was such a head-scratcher, I'm tempted to not even bring it up at all. Now, the chaos factor is playable, but if your characters aren't ready for serious, hardcore combat, and your ST isn't prepared to make serious adjustments to match, then don't get too attached to any character you bring into that adventure. Now, Sam gets some serious character development in for Auld Lang Syne, which appeared in the first When Will You Rage anthology, and not only do I think it was good, I wish there had been more of it. We got to see some internal conflict in Sam Haight, a multifaceted character who is simultaneously angry, cunning, methodical, brutal, regretful, a little bit caring, and most of all, driven. The story offered him an off-ramp from being the Skinner, and going back to being an ordinary guy again. But to do so would have required that he admit that he had made a mistake before. And he, like a lot of people, would rather walk through the bowels of hell than turn away from a bad choice made in earnest. And that Sam Haight, to me, probably would have been a little bit closer to the bone and a lot more interesting than the ultimate badass. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Until next time.